Thank you everyone for showing up today for an introduction to talk about alternative providers for further education. With us today, we have Jackie Burke. She's the Governor and Enterprise Advisor for Mildenhall College Academy in Mildenhall. And then also we have Faye Thomas, the Executive Director of Prevista, who will be speaking with us today. So I will turn it over to you two.
Okay, thanks, Darian, very much for that. So as Darian has said, I wear a couple of different hats, and Darian and I know each other through my work as an enterprise advisor and the governor with a responsibility for careers at Mildenhall College Academy, which is a largest secondary school in West Suffolk. And the reason that this conversation came about was actually through a conversation that Darian and myself and our careers lead at school were having, where we were considering the Gatsby benchmark and discovered that maybe we had a little bit of a gap in terms of people's knowledge and understanding. And Darian suggested that that was maybe common for other people as well. So that's a little bit of background as to why we put this session on. So putting my other hat on, I'm also chair of the board of trustees for a company called Prevista, which is an employee-owned trust. And Prevista are what are commonly known as an independent training provider. So I'm delighted to have Faye Thomas here from Prevista, who's going to talk to you a bit about the sort of things that Prevista does, and that will give you an idea of the work of independent training providers. So just as a reminder to start with in terms of context of why we're having this conversation. So this is all about us being able to better support the CEIAG for our students in our schools, informing them of the full range of options and opportunities that are available to them when they move on from us. And in particular, we're focusing on what's known as the Baker Clause within Gatsby benchmark number 7, which suggests that every learner should have a meaningful encounter with a range of learning providers, including apprenticeship and training providers. And it was through looking at that particular benchmark indicator that we kind of established that that's perhaps a gap in the understanding of a lot of people that are enterprise advisors or careers leads or lead governors. So hence why we're going to say a little bit about that for you today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and Faye is going to pick that up and just take you through some information about independent training providers in general, what they are, what they do, how they can support your students, and use Prevista as an example to illustrate some of the things she's going to say. At the end of the session, we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A if people have got any specific questions that haven't been covered. Okay, so Faye, over to you.
Thank you, Jackie. And thank you, everybody, for inviting me today to speak with you in regards to... that was going to happen, wasn't it? Sorry. Okay, I start. At least I was just at the very beginning. So thanks for inviting me to speak today. And I really wanted to ask you a question, actually. And I want you to be very honest. When you hear the word independent training provider, what do you think? What pops into your head when you hear about that phrase? Because I bearing in mind, I don't know how much contact you've had with independent training providers or what experiences you've had. So I'd be very interested in just, please feel free to say or speak or
well,
you know.
If people put things in the chat, they can come on live and chat if they want to, but if people put things in the chat, I'll be happy to pass them on as you're in there. One of the things that one person put in there was cost, okay. Which is a real issue for schools. We can be honest about that, because a lot of them do not have a budget, for this type of stuff, or it's a very limited budget for this type of stuff. And then another thing is about, quality, of the training that's being provided. You know, what's the quality for the students that they're coming into it, travel. So and every time Darren mentions it, it's highlight the gap of my knowledge. Well, and mine too, and that's the reason it came about this, because as Jackie said, we had this conversation. I said, I really don't fully understand what, you know, who independent training providers are and what they do and how they work. And I thought that's the reason this came about.
Mm-hmm. So I can see in the chat as well, so Josie's saying providing continued education to those who potentially need, and I think that is quite interesting there in terms of what we what the range of independent training providers do deliver. I put some thoughts together myself, she says, and my slide. There we go. So I think I maybe picked up a couple of things that mentioned here. These are maybe more, some have maybe negative connotations. So a lack of oversight purely by the name independent could seem to lead people to believe there's something maverick going on there. And that might be maverick in a good sense, but often sometimes it could be that there's a lack of oversight. Deliver less of value education. So that was one of the points that colleagues mentioned. You know, there's a standard, Jackie and I had a conversation about this recently, and particularly came out around the white paper, where FE and HE is valued and the language that's used around those things. And independent training providers definitely operate in the FE space predominantly. Questionable quality. And for employed people, so a lot of independent training providers may be seen as helping people who are employed already. So I thought I'd give you just a bit, and I'm happy to take questions as we go along in the chat or, you know, as we flow, but I'll just give you a little bit of information, then I can stop and pause and ask questions as I go. So we do independent training providers. We provide vocational education to young people and adults. We are called independent training providers. We're often called private training providers, but as Jackie has just mentioned, that doesn't capture everything that's unique with our sort of part of the sector. So we are an employee-owned trust, but there are charities who are independent training providers. So there's quite a plethora of business models, and I understand that there are those of you who work with businesses directly in this meeting today will understand that. So they're not all privately owned. So we're distinct in that we're not run or directly controlled by the state. That's simply why we're called independent. And 100% of our work is publicly funded, and we have to tender for opportunities. So we tender for the opportunity, the privilege to deliver training and education services on behalf of the government, the Department of Work and Pensions, and primarily the Education Skills Funding Agency.
Hey, is that for all independent training providers have to go through this tendering process?
Most 99% of us do. 99% of us do. So there are very small organisations who will have a roll-on contract, and they will be for providing unique specialist services to particularly people who have a disability or something else like that. So there is a small cohort who will have a rolling, maybe local authorities contract, a contract for services, and it will just continue to roll.
Okay.
Although with the challenges that many local authorities have now, that at some point there's a tendering. But yeah, we have to compete. So we have to compete and in order to do that, we have to prove that we deliver very well. And we are Ofsted inspected. If we have a prime contract, so if we have a prime contract with the Education Skills Funding Agency, just like a college, we are inspected by Ofsted. We are held by exactly the same regulations, our quality of teaching and learning, how we deliver behaviours and attitudes, our safeguarding, everything is measured exactly the same. We do have subcontractors, and some independent training providers are subcontractors. But that's exactly the same as colleges. So colleges can subcontract some of their delivery. But I can take questions about that later on. But it's exactly the same as the rest of the further education sector. What do we do? What do they do? What do we do? A separate entity out there. So we pretty much do everything that we can do. We often work across, and I mentioned our two main funders, the Education Skills Funding Agency and the Department of Work and Pensions. And obviously there's a massive crossover with the aims and objectives for those two main funders. But in addition to that, local authorities funders and the devolved authorities funders, so the Greater London Authority, the Mayor's Office, but also LEPs. So New Anglia LEP come funders, Coastal Capital LEP come funders. But again, we have to tender for opportunities, competitively tender for opportunities. So these are the range of services. Many independent training providers specialise, and very, very much specialised. So recently I've been looking at partnerships with organisations that specialise in construction, in fitness, in working with young people who have SEND in a particular area. So, or there may be, as someone mentioned earlier, people who specialise in supporting people to either prevent them becoming NEET, or unfortunately they're NEET, so let's stop that cycle of low pay unemployment that a NEET person is more likely to enter into if we don't pick them up quickly. So this is the range of services that we deliver. So just as an overview of the FE sector itself, I thought this is quite interesting, really. Blue is my favourite colour, but that wasn't why I chose it as the quadrant that's about 48%. So on the register for apprentices training providers, there's about 2,187. That's not about. There is specifically 2,187 registered providers in the last 2019 report, of which 1,050 are independent training providers versus 590 colleges. So independent training providers are the most numerous. And so it's a pretty big sector, and it's a pretty big diverse sector that is very highly regulated. So being able to engage with this sector, who often can have the flexibility to be able to work creatively with partner organisations like schools and colleges and sixth forms to be able to meet local need for young people, is actually to a great advantage for everybody, because we are able to quickly make decisions and quickly tailor provision to meet specific needs for our young people, but as underneath the umbrella of the highly regulated place that we operate within. We are more vulnerable than colleges. So if we don't deliver our contracts and are there any questions about how we deliver our contracts, then we don't have the saving graces that colleges have, which is support. And often colleges have there are political reasons why colleges continue to merge or work together, but an independent training provider, you've got to deliver really well to continue to survive and continue to secure new business and deliver well. So quality, and Jackie is a board member of our trust board who I'm going to use this word, Jackie, relentlessly drives this through. Relentlessly. I say that with a smile because it is important. And really, you know, having the learner-centric position means that actually an independent training provider, someone mentioned cost and money. If we centre money at the heart of everything we do, we'll fail really quickly, really quickly. If you don't make great margins if you want to be an independent training provider. You do it for the same reasons that many of you are here, because you're educationalists and you want to succeed, for the young people. So learners and employers. So just some more facts and figures to give you an idea. So 3.3 million adults in education and training in England annually. This was from last year. 21% go to an ITP, and a fifth of 16 to 19-year-olds choose to go to an independent training provider. And we do a lot of work with adults who are not, who either need their maths and English improved, or they want to secure a higher level qualification. We do engage a high number of learners who have a learning difficulty or a disability. Indeed, at Prevista, and it's a statistic that I'm very proud of, our learners who have declared a disability, and I use that word declared a disability, have higher success rates than our learners who don't have a disability. And one of my passions about being in this industry is I have family who have a disability or are autistic. My nephews are, and they've channeled through the higher education route, but they've ended up with an ITP in order to secure their career opportunity. And that's okay, that's fine, but I'm proud of the fact that that's where ITPs can help support young people. So yeah, that's my favorite statistic at our organization. 90% of learners are satisfied. I know you can ask that question in many ways, but again, we're proud of that. And we have to work very closely directly with our employers in order to deliver our apprenticeship provision. So employers don't come to us, we go to the employers. We have to market our provision to employers. We have to sell the quality and the success that we deliver, because we don't have a brand, maybe like other institutions that are delivering apprenticeships. So we have to deliver the quality that we have.
Okay, Faye, there's a question there. Is there a searchable list of ITPs and their specialties that you all have amongst yourselves, or that a national database that teaching staff could tap into to search them, or are you aware of that? I know let me continue on with it. I know, Dan, you asked this. Suffolk County Council does have a listing of the ITPs that are available in the area, and I'm pretty sure those of you from Norfolk, they probably have the same thing as well. But outside of that, is there a national list that they can go to that you all are aware of?
Yeah, so the thing called the ROAT app, so the Register of Apprenticeship Training Providers, is where you must go, because those are the authorised due diligence list of providers, and you can search through there. The LEP is very helpful, so any LEP area that any person who is interested within, because there's a level of quality assurance within the LEP as well. And then we have Ofsted too. So those are the best places to go to for apprenticeship provision. But remember, ITPs deliver quite a range of services. So traineeships is another opportunity for young people, those young people who maybe need a little bit more of a helping hand to start their career. So those would be, I can see the chat here, but I'm very happy for you to just pop in with the questions. That's really helpful, actually. So ITPs, we know that Ofsted hasn't been inspecting anyone. We've been in a COVID year, and in some ways we're thankful, but in many ways we're all just waking up for this to come back again. And nobody can rest on our laurels and think that we won't be held to account and assessed. So 80% of ITPs were judged good or outstanding in their latest inspection by Ofsted, and 83% of employers are satisfied with the overall quality of training. So this was in the last report that I could get, where it was a separate, ITPs were separately mentioned. And obviously the inspectorate has mentioned the value of ITPs. And then, interestingly enough, independent training providers have, in lockdown in 2020, our role has become more visible, much more visible to the sector as a whole. So FE Week and the FE sector itself have highlighted the fact of independent training providers. Sometimes we get forgotten about when decisions are made, maybe about exams. We had a big debacle about functional skills over the summer. All our apprentices needed to get their functional skills done. They were excited. They wanted to complete their qualifications. But everybody thought about O-levels, not O-levels. I'm showing my age. Sorry. What are they called? GCSEs. GCSEs and A-levels.
Yeah.
And they forgot about maths and English and the functional skills and how they were going to. And so that became, and that, you know, really, really affected independent training providers significantly over the summer. So we do sometimes get forgotten about at the last in terms of the decisions that are made by the, you know, our decision makers and the government, but our profile is raised significantly. And in the Education Skills Funding Agency now, there's a separate group of people who take care of larger independent training providers, and they provide scrutiny monitoring over what we do. And
you mentioned earlier that sometimes you all use subcontractors as well, or independent training providers can use subcontractors as well. Are those subcontractors you use, are they Ofsted inspected as well?
They're Ofsted inspected as part of my Ofsted inspection. So I'm a prime, so exactly like a college. So exactly like a college. So if I was a subcontractor to a college, then I'd be part of their inspection.
Okay.
If a subcontractor was part of my prime delivery, then they're subject to the inspection. But we do get scrutinized about our subcontracting delivery, and there are very, very and increased tighter rules about subcontracting within our sector at the moment. There's only going to be under a stronger lens than ever before. So the quality of our subcontractors and how we use subcontractors to meet local need and support the economic recovery is something that is definitely under a lens, and it won't go away, which is right. It's right. It's public money, you know, it's public money. So apprenticeships. So 75% of all apprenticeships are delivered by ITPs. So 50, and here is where 50% is through directly from the government and 25% through subcontracted delivery. So colleges deliver 20% and adult education learning organisations 5%. So apprenticeships, independent training providers, are where the majority of apprenticeships are delivered. And they're delivered in partnership with their employers. And this doesn't mean that the apprenticeships that are delivered by colleges are not of value. Absolutely, no, it doesn't. It just means that there's a space for everybody. And in colleges, very much in colleges, you have very technical, there are skills-based, but it's very knowledge-based apprenticeships that can fall into the college-based delivery model. And the top 10 most popular sectors for apprenticeships are, and this is where we operate within. So I said the word O-level, so that's probably definitely aged me for some of you on this call, and some of you maybe think, goodness, what she's talking about. But when I first heard apprenticeships, when I was very young, they were in very, very traditional trades. And as we all know, apprenticeships now wash across a number of, well, all sectors actually. But for many years, obviously, apprenticeships suffered from some negative views, particularly low-value apprenticeships that were very short in duration, and the learners didn't have they really didn't gain a huge amount of skills. These ended up being in catering, hospitality and retail. And we've moved on in such a huge way since those times. And the level of quality assurance that we need to demonstrate and want to demonstrate is high. And that's the right thing, because we want young people to succeed.
Are they been with COVID, and especially how it's affected the visitor economy across the country, but are there going to be, do you think there's going to be a push in that area under ITP for the hospitality trade, and that to get more people in there now? Because I think it's been hit, and I think you think they're going to really try to do a push to generate and get more people in?
So apprenticeships as a whole there was about a 49%, 48 or 49% drop in apprenticeship starts in 2020. So the bottom fell out of apprenticeships, new apprenticeship starts in 2020, because obviously you need to be employed to be an apprentice. And apprenticeships are primarily young people, they're not exclusive for young people, they're primarily for young people. And the young people were the people who lost their jobs or got furloughed within 2020. In terms of growth sectors within each LEP region, so within each LEP region, depending on which economies you are focused on, so if you're in science and tech, those jobs will continue. And actually the top part of, I believe the top part of your LEP does contain science and tech. So in terms of tourism, hospitality, the recovery for that sector is planned to take up to between 2023 and 24 to recover to 2019
levels.
Yeah, so it's a long climb. So significantly what we're seeing is that we're seeing funders tender or funders tender for either transferring skills or upskilling people. So people skilling from, moving levels or moving qualifications, moving skills from one sector to another sector. There's a big move for digital skills. And there's also a big move in the creative sector for the self-employment model, which is quite, that's how that sector operates within a self-employment model. And then there's a move and a desire to meet higher level clinical. So where you've got pathways for health and social care, there is a focus significantly now to see if we can support people who are in a health and social care, maybe level 2, and moving that up into clinical type roles. So those are some of the areas of focus and growth. And in addition to that, actually, we still have logistics is still significant. Logistics is a sector that has grown significantly, has weathered through COVID, and people are looking to see whether they can future-proof their careers as well. So, I mean, I think for young people in terms of apprenticeships, the scare for young people is debt. And an apprenticeship still has the great line, learn and earn. And, the level of quality assurance with a good employer on an apprenticeship provision really means that a young person come out the other end 3 years later, 2.5, 3 years later, with a high level qualification, good level of experience, and not a significant amount of debt, which is, very off-putting for young people who may well not have traditionally entered into higher education because of their lack of experience in debt, because of where they are in, I'm going to use the old world, in the class system. So apprenticeships are a route way.
Okay.
These are some of the stats from Prevista. This isn't a sales pitch for Prevista, not at all, but it just gives you some idea of what we have to achieve and what we want to achieve as an organisation. And there's my lovely stat about my learners with a disability, which I'm really pleased about. So we do a wide range of opportunities at Prevista as an independent training provider. We've been going for about 26, 27 years now, and evolved over the years from a business that supported very much self-employment, enterprise, moved into skills, moved into employability, and often independent training providers will have lots of sort of strings to their bow, lots of parts of I suppose various sectors that they can bring together and plug together quite neatly. And this is one stat that I'm quite proud of, actually. 84% monthly meaningful engagement with our learners through the pandemic. And this means 84% of all of our learners. We have around 3,000 learners in total across all of our programs. have actively engaged, participated, undertaken work meaningfully on a monthly basis throughout the lockdown. And when you consider that young people were significantly affected by furlough, many were made redundant, and our young people on traineeships struggled to get work experience, we are quite pleased about this.
Well, that is a good stat.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Jackie wouldn't let me put anything up here that wasn't true. She says, where's your evidence base, Faye?
Just on the back of that, I will just say that some of the stories that I'm hearing from apprentices that are perhaps are studying with a college. I have a young friend that I know that's in that situation and really hasn't felt supported through the pandemic, where, you know, the college just basically has kind of shut down. And, you know, he's complaining that he's had very, very limited engagement going right the way through. So this is one of the things we've really focused on, that we've transformed the way that we do things. We do everything online, and we've managed to keep everything going right the way through, which I think is a real credit to Faye and her team.
I think the way we reacted, just quickly tell you, the way that we reacted when it all became apparent that we were locking down, and my mum came down to visit me in Ramsgate, and then for her birthday, and then managed to get back up to Hull about 2 days before lockdown occurred. And I haven't seen her for a year now. So bye, Mum. And then we created within our organisation sort of like the cabinet war rooms, I suppose, and that and we met every single day in the very beginning, and the board were very, very involved and very engaged in making sure that as a business all the staff had everything they needed to do very, very quickly. They were enabled to make sure that they could continue. Everything was released, all the decisions, the worrying, everything else like that. All the tutors could really, really focus on engaging their learners and using their creative ways to be able to continue teaching, continue supporting, continue delivering the knowledge and skills base. And I think that was our staff are, you know, are the people who motivate our learners and enabling our staff to be able to be the best that they can. And we've had communications, we've had quizzes, we've had newsletters, we've had employer newsletters, we've had employer workshops, with everything to keep everything, all the wheels going. And it's been hard work, but we've also learned a lot that will continue. And now our blended delivery model is absolutely embedded within the organisation, so that our reach is probably greater now in terms of the flexibility that we have, but also the diversity of the learners that we can engage with, and when and how we can engage with them. So, and I think that's quite important, because if you just have one model of delivery, then you may well be excluding a whole group of learners who want to engage and learn in a very different way. So I think that's, in some ways, that's freed us somewhat to a straitjacket of maybe a delivery model that we had before, and now we're much more flexible, and learners can drive their learning, I think, in a way maybe that they might not have thought they were able to before. So let's talk about young person. So this is Reese, and he's one of our traineeship learners, and he's obviously happy to let his face be shared today. So he started on our traineeship revision in October, so we engaged him just in that very small window when the world was awake, before lockdown 1 or 2 and lockdown 3 or 4. Reese had not been in work for some time as he's a young person, and he wasn't actually engaged in any education at all either. He came through a referral, I believe, through a local authority or a local authority job centre partnership. We do have significant relationships with SEND teams within local authorities, and as a business, I'm going to use the fashionable word pivot, but we have we've made a conscious decision to try and increase the number of learners who are SEND and have a disability within the business, and we brought specialists in. So our traineeship manager, the lady who runs all our traineeship provision, is a disability SEND specialist. And we've increased the training across the business for everybody within this space. So I think it makes us a richer organisation, actually, to have more diverse base of learners. So he's motivated and assertive, and his ambition was to work in cybersecurity. But as a young person, he struggled to convey his career aspirations to the fullest extent, and also the behaviours that Reese demonstrated were, and it often happens with people who are autistic, were interpreted in a negative way. So, and indeed, my nephews are on the autism spectrum, and I fully understand how this can limit. Not him, he's not the limiting factor. Actually, society is the limiting factor for Reese. He's not the limiting factor, because he is intelligent and smart and engaging. So he joined our traineeship provision. He came in for our orientation. He came in for our taster workshops. And on his initial assessment, he had assignment to one-to-one mentor, and we prescribed or set out his personal development program, particularly working on his confidence and how he communicated, we worked on his deportment, how he held himself, how he occupied space, because it is strange. And remember, some of this was happening remotely, and actually Reese didn't have a problem with working through these little boxes that we're all working through. He actually found it easier to read language and emotions through the boxes, because it contained what he was reading, the amount of body language that he was reading at that moment in time. So that actually became easier for him.
Good.
We harnessed this. Go on.
No, I was just saying, do you have your other business contact? How are other businesses about employing, that you have contacts with employing people with special educational needs? Or do you have a wider base, more interest? Because I know we run into that a lot, where companies are afraid to bring SEND people into there, and it's, and sometimes, because how are they going to be supported? Do they need to be supported or not supported? Those type of things.
I'm going to be honest with you. You need to have staff within the business who are passionate, and in some ways don't take no for an answer, and are a bit of a bulldozers. I'm sure they don't want me to describe them that way, but they need to be very confident to break down those perceptions that someone who is SEND, who sends, is going to be a burden, who's going to be negative, who cannot contribute to the profitability and the success of their business. It's you have to have staff who are able to fully understand that, and to firmly, and it is true, firmly correct that a perception that's wrong. So it's like in many organizations, when you use the word reasonable adaptation, people think you're going to have to put a lift in. Well, we all know that's not the case. We know that maybe the headset, maybe a screen, your screen cover or something else like that. Most reasonable adjustments are about 80 quid on average. So it's really, it's really not the case. What we do is we do have a bank of employers who understand us as a culture and an organisation, and we use them to pathway us to other employers. Okay. So we use them to buddy and pathway recommend. We use the experience. We video people with their consent. We video people so that people can see what people can demonstrate. So video CVs or videos demonstrating work experience in the workplace, demonstrating aptitude with the young person's consent, is another way to be able to share what people can do. We try to remove an interview where we think it wouldn't be appropriate, or we just don't think it's going to be the best way to sell someone's success. I don't like interviews. So, some people like them, some people don't. Just because you send doesn't mean you wouldn't like an interview. You might well do very well. But for each individual, we're trying to make sure that we get them the best exposure in front of their employer in the best way that demonstrates their skills. We try to subvert, or not subvert, we try, no, it is subvert, be honest, Faye. We try and change recruitment practices where we think they're going to exclude the employer from accessing the widest pool of skills that will meet their need. We always have to maintain the fact that this is a skill set that you need within your business. And this is where we come to the point of job carving. I don't know how many of you may well know about job carving, but that's taking a job description, pulling it apart, looking at the elements of the job, which actually these are the skills that are required. So actually you don't need one person to build a car, sell a car, and market the car and paint the car blue and drive the car in a test. You don't need one person to do all those things. Let's do this really, really well. Well, we've got someone who can do this element really, really well, and then bundled up with the rest of a full role within all of those skill sets. And that's what we use. So we use job carving. We do a lot of reverse job search and reverse marketing of our candidates straight out into the workplace. And we do interview practice, it's needed, and we do skills-based CV. We are running a program at the moment called Kickstart, and I'll mention a little bit about that in a minute. And Kickstart is for young people 16 to 24 years old, gives them anybody can do it, not just independent training providers. But my point is on Kickstart is I have a project manager, he's new to our space, and he's receiving CVs from young people 16 to 24, and those CVs, he's having to do a huge amount of work on those CVs. Now, if we weren't filtering that before it got to the employer, the young person is already on the back foot. So skills-based CVs was the other element that we did with Reese. And he's now working in cybersecurity, and he's got a really, really good job. It's really well paid. It's really highly paid, actually, for an average young person's salary. Yeah, I think it's about like 30k or 35k or something. It's really cool. So that's go on.
No, I was just saying, I bet he's very happy.
I bet he is. Yeah, well, we said, no, you've got to let us say you did this, Reese. It's great. So in apprenticeships, we do all, as I say, independent training providers, 6 in 10 learners do their apprenticeship with an independent training providers. We do quite a broad range of apprenticeships, and obviously that will continue. There are higher level apprenticeships. Many ITPs do deliver higher level apprenticeships, and some apprenticeship providers who specialize. There's one independent training provider who specializes in education, actually, and does a whole range of level 1 qualification, entry level, then into level 2, right up to, I think it's level 7, right through in the space up to higher level, and they specialize in education, so there's a school space. And often you will find independent training providers who specialize sectorally, and that's quite, I mean, that's great, because what you've got is you've got a whole employer base who value that independent training provider and go there, they're their go-to for apprenticeships, and then subsequently for new employees. We mentioned, though, that there is specifically some challenges for young people, and although we know, because unfortunately of COVID, long-term unemployment will enter 1.6 million in 21-22. If you think about when furlough eventually ends, it will end eventually. We've had three extensions now?
Yes.
Definitely, yeah. But it's going to happen. There's still a significant number of people on furlough. So we need to make sure that, and within that, the cohort of young people is over 250,000. Despite the Chancellor's plan for jobs. So we need to make sure that we are all, as a sector, making sure that we address those young people and support those young people who are in that space already, but prevent the next tranche of young people being impacted adversely as well. And we've bolstered significantly our mental well-being support on all of our provision. And this year, we're training all of our staff in mental health first aid to make sure that we can support everybody, not just young people, but everybody who predominantly we support young people with their mental well-being and their resilience whilst they come through our training, so that they have the opportunity to succeed in the future. I think I'm pretty much nearly there. I mentioned Kickstart. We're not the only provider of this. I would encourage you to look at the Kickstart scheme for businesses, which is to support businesses to take on a young person 16 to 24 for 6 months, and the government is fully funding the wages for 6 months, including any pensions, national insurance costs, and this is a great route way for young people to get their foot in the door with a reputational employer and a good organization who can support them and the employer. And I'm happy to circulate some information at the end of this if either you want to be able to access this scheme for your young people if you don't know about it already, or for any of the businesses and employers that you work with, or indeed the school itself. So schools and education settings can become Kickstart employers. So I think I'm just a freebie government advert for this at the moment, but I do believe in it, and I think it's a great scheme. It ends in December, which is why it currently ends in December, which is why I'm suggesting everybody needs to take advantage of it now, for allowing young people to get their foot in the door. So and the last bit, this was our traineeship revision that Reese was on in our most recent survey in January 2021. 100% of our learners, quite a nice bar really from our survey, said they'd recommend us. So nice way to finish finish my presentation on a Tuesday afternoon. But I'm happy to take questions now, or just have a discussion if need be.
Yep. Anybody have any questions? Feel free to come on.
Are you able to say anything about cost? You've talked there about Kickstart, and there's obviously government support to employers to take on young people on the Kickstart scheme. Can you say a little bit about cost implications in terms of apprenticeships and other services? Because that was one of the concerns that was raised at the beginning.
So yes, of course. Thank you, Jackie. So there are a couple of lenses to look at cost. So Provista has a contract to deliver apprenticeships. We are paid by the government to deliver the apprenticeships. We are there's something called the apprenticeship, used to be called the digital apprenticeship service, but that's the way that we access our funding. That's why we're publicly funded. There is a contribution that the employer must make depending on the age of the person that they engage with. It's not huge. It's 5% of the total qualification framework. So it could be something like £300 for a £3,000 apprenticeship qualification.
Would that be the same if somebody engages on an apprenticeship through a college?
Yes, it has to. The college has to collect the same employer contribution. Yeah. So we are. So we get our funding from government to deliver the apprenticeships. We also get our funding from government to deliver the traineeships. So there isn't a cost. The cost to employers, currently the cost to employers isn't very high, and there are incentives for employers to engage in the scheme. So incentives anything up to £4,000 for them to take on a young person on an apprenticeship program at the moment. I think that's from the 1st of August, 1st of April. So it would seem to me that cost for an employer is minimal, really. But the point is that it's the long-term cost of training someone who will be shaped and molded for your business that would be the greater return. I think if you're engaging with an independent training provider and if you're an employer, you need to look at what value you're getting, and you need to make sure that they are an organisation that have been Ofsted inspected, and that they have, you can satisfy yourself through your own due diligence, and employers can be helped with that to make sure that they're an organisation of integrity. So does that answer the question of cost?
I think that's a good thing about the offset inspection. That's something, especially schools or anyone else, if you're looking to bring someone or signpost a student to that direction, that might be a question that you as a careers lead might want to ask, what's your latest offset inspection, or are you being off, just to make sure that you're covering your bases and that the person, they're as legit as they should be.
Yeah, I suppose I wonder, if careers advisors, there's a fear about favouring one organisation over another, and if you invited an ITP into a sixth form or into, I'm not going to say I know which year it is, but the final year of school before sixth form. I'm not even going to try to say what year it is.
Year 11.
Year 11, right? So if you invite an ITP in, then do you then have to invite all the ITPs in because you're favouring one over another? But you're not. It's the young person's choice.
Yeah.
Everything is about the young person's choice and giving them a menu. And there's nothing wrong. I worked with some schools in Waltham Forest, actually, in northeast London, and I was an independent training provider who used to bring in employers, it's about 30 employers, and they brought them in and they did sort of like this interview round robin day, and then the employers, and they were from all walks of life, from the Met Police, from your Sainsbury's, Tesco's, from everything. They were from everywhere, and they ended up being mentors to some of the young people, and then the young people eyes opened up and they felt, actually, this is a career for me. I want to follow this career, whereas maybe everybody else in that young person's life might have closed off that career choice for them, because sometimes that can happen. We may well think this is the right career choice for this person, and it may well be there. If we open everyone's minds, they might consider something that's really curveball. I've seen that with young people in work, and they said, I will never, ever, ever work in an X. So then I close off a whole sector of that industry, a whole sector. And then they come up and say, I found this job. And I'm like, you told me, whatever, Yeah. Jackie, sorry.
I think one of the things that we do at school is we have a sector of the month that we focus on. So we give a lot of support to our students during that month around that particular sector. So I think one of the good things about independent training providers is you can find somebody that specialises in that particular sector and can come in and talk to students as part of your sector of the month, or however you do things, that has really in-depth knowledge and understanding about how careers work and what the different careers opportunities are for a young person going into that particular sector, and advise them on, what are the steps you need to be taking in terms of your education in order to move into that sector and move up that sector. So that specialism of ITPs is quite useful.
Good. Well, I want to thank you. We went well over. No, it's been great. It's been a great conversation. It's been you provide a lot of information. I've learned a lot. I mean, I do understand a lot more now. I mean, just the offset stuff alone was, that you're competing for tenders, and I didn't realize any of that, and probably a lot of other people didn't either. So it just kind of opens my eyes to the vetting process that you all have to go through, and that you do internally as well. So if there's no other questions, or if people have questions, you can leave them here, and I'll be happy to pass them on to you, Faye and Jackie. And I'd also like to thank you both for taking your time to come on here and talk with us today. It's much appreciated. So from that, like I said, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to drop a line to me or your enterprise coordinator if you don't fall under myself in Suffolk, and they'll get it to me, and I'll be happy to pass those on. And again, thank you all for your time, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks ever so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.